National No Smoking Day on Breeze, brought to you by Nicorette.
Hello and welcome once again to Gardener's Diary, where the waters are rippling, the birds are singing, but we're still wrapping up warm against the cold. This week, John Ravenscroft surrounds himself with the heralds of spring, crocus and cyclamen coon. Jeff Hodge says it's time to give your roses a spring pruning, and he'll be showing us how. And Reg Moore will be sowing tomatoes and peppers under glass and making sure of that salad bowl for this summer. But let's start with Nigel Snow, who surrounded himself with a host of wonderfully coloured camellias.
As far as evergreens go in the garden, I think camellias are probably the most attractive, and they are hardy. It's taken a long time for us to realise this, because when camellias first appeared in this country from Japan, way back in the 1700s, they were thought of as being tender. So they were kept indoors, they were cosseted, and it wasn't really until the middle of this century, having survived a few bad winters outside, that we could really capitalise on the fact that they are a hardy garden plant. This one I've got in front of me, I think probably is the epitome of a modern camellia. Here we've got this wonderful contrast between the golden stamens and the single red petals, a very, very bright flower. But if you look at the foliage, especially up here on this young foliage, you'll see it's got a very striking variegation. And this means that you're getting your money's worth out of a plant, because you've got the foliage all the way through the winter. Then in the spring you look forward to a very bright and contrasting flower. But of course they weren't always like this, and if I put this one out of the way, the sort of plant there used to be was something like this one, Camellia japonica, and a form called Adolf Audison. And this is very much how they were found in Japan. But of course there they'd been bred for hundreds of years, and when they came to the West there already were a lot of these varieties. And a typical japonica variety has this huge glossy leaf. You can see here how leathery and shiny they are. And then the flower is born in the spring. And if ever there was a problem with camellias, it's the fact that the flowers do get frosted. So it's a good idea to plant them facing north, somewhere they will never dry out, and somewhere where the flower can actually thaw out nice and slowly, instead of thawing out fast, which what would happen if you put them in the sun, of course. But there are some beautiful varieties. Look at this one here. This is something I've not seen before. Berenice Perfection. Isn't it marvellous? Just when you think you've seen all the shapes and colours and sizes, you find there's actually more to come. And these are japonica camellias, very similar to this one here, and this is the sort of healthy state you want your plants to be in. Now when you're planting it in the ground, it is an acid loving plant, so if you haven't got a naturally peaty, well-drained soil, then this is what you must add as you plant it. It must be moisture retentive, so it likes a good mulch to keep that moisture there during the summer months. It would welcome some sun if you could keep it moist. Now this is the sort of difference that you get. But japonica was crossed in Cornwall at Cahays and also at Board Hill with another species, Saliarensis, and that gave us this group of camellias, Williamsii hybrids, and this one here is by far the most popular of all. This is Donation, and it's beautiful. It flowers when it's very young, it carries on flowering a long time, magnificent colour, perfect for pot work, but when it's young, keep it protected. If ever there was a fault, is that really for 2-3 years maybe, they want keeping out of the worst of the weather. So grow them in pots where you can move them around, and that way you can bring them in if the weather is bad and put them out to enjoy the sunshine. So these are the ones to try. Remember, they're acid lovers, remember to feed them well, never let them dry out, it should be trouble free.
You know, this is one of my favourite times of year because I can look forward to harvesting all sorts of fruit from the greenhouse. And now is the time for us to start thinking about sowing these crops so that we've got them all ready to harvest during the height of the summer and enjoying our salads. Among the things we can be sowing are tomatoes, like these ones here, still on the vine. We have some peppers here, sweet peppers. Of course, they start off green and they gradually go red on the plant, so that's okay. And then in the front there, we've got the chili peppers, which are becoming more and more popular every year and just as easy for us to grow in the greenhouse as the ordinary ones. In fact, both peppers and tomatoes do need fairly similar conditions, really, to do well. The next thing to think about is a compost that we're going to sow them in, and what I've got here is some compost I've brought into the greenhouse. This one's a seed or potting compost, but the essential thing is that the compost is warm, and this one has been in the greenhouse here for a week or so warming up, so it's nice and warm and it will help to get the seeds to germinate that much more quickly. In order to work out when the actual sowing date should be, what we need to do is find out when our greenhouse is going to stay above about 50-55 degrees day and night. And to do that, you just set up a maximum minimum thermometer in the greenhouse and monitor the temperatures, and then you'll have an idea of how the temperatures run in your greenhouse for the following year. With us, we know that we can put them into a cold greenhouse around about the middle of May, and you just get your calendar when you've worked out when the temperatures are correct, and go back 9 weeks, which brings us to the sort of early to middle weeks of March, which is when we should be sowing the seeds, which is of course around about now. There's all sorts of varieties of tomatoes to choose from. Ones that I think are interesting, there's Tumbler here, which is one of the types you can grow in a hanging basket. It has quite small fruit with a good flavour. And then another thing you could try this year would be a yellow tomato. I quite like them. They've got a nice sweet flavour to them as well. And then we have these large beefsteak or cooking tomatoes, which again more and more people are choosing to try and grow in their greenhouses. I've gone for a more traditional variety, the old Shirley, which is a good variety for growing in a cold greenhouse. It always gives me reliable crops, and so that's what I'm going to actually sow. And when it comes to sowing, some people prefer to put 2 seeds into these sort of section trays like this, 2 seeds in each section, and then you just thin them out to leave the strongest one to grow on. You could sow seeds in a seed tray. These half-sized trays fit nicely into propagators, but I'm going to be sowing them in a pot because there's not all that many seeds in a packet anyway. As far as the temperature is concerned, the tomatoes need a temperature of about 65 degrees if they're going to grow on successfully. If I just wedge the pot like that, you might be able to see me sowing better. Whereas the capsicums, the peppers, they need a temperature of around about 70 degrees if they're going to do well. So here's our seeds just sort of scattered around on the top of the pot like that. You can always space them out a bit with a knife if you want to space them out a bit further, but they'll come on nicely like that in a propagator. And then I'm going to cover them with some vermiculite like this. Just scatter it on through your hands. Some people like to cover theirs with sand because they reckon that sand brings the seed coat off the tomato seedling that much better. Whatever you do, don't use one of these fine sieves to actually sieve compost back over the top of your seeds because the compost is too fine when it's passed through here and it forms a pan and actually inhibits the germination of the seed. So if you just do it like that with a bit of vermiculite or sand, and then once you've got them set up like this, you pop them into a propagator like this electric one that I've got set up here. As I said before, set to about 65 degrees.
Roddy Llewellyn's getting grubby.
Well, that plant is called Silibum.
Roddy's getting green. Roddy's getting indoors. With Roddy, you can grow wonderful fresh herbs for your kitchen.
Cacti and strange spiky plants for your lounge.
For the best possible gardening advice, watch Breeze.
Have a dirty weekend with Roddy Llewellyn's Indoor Gardens. Friday at 11 on Breeze.
Cartwheel.
Cartwright, the all-American family. There's Dad. Little Joe, ahead with the girls. Armed and extremely dangerous, it's Adam. And on a diet, Hoss.
If I don't get some eat pretty soon, I'm liable to just lay down right here and die.
Bonanza, Saturday and Sunday at 3 on Granada Plus, home of the hits.
Ever thought about being a writer?
I used to be a barman.
I was a secretary.
For my first novel, Red, I was paid a £25,000 advance.
My first 3 novels are all bestsellers.
I wouldn't have got my book published without the help of the Writers' Bureau Home Study course.
The Writers' Bureau made this possible for me.
The course gave me the confidence to start.
I'd always enjoyed writing, but I had no idea if I was any good.
The tutors helped, encouraged and offered me very valuable advice.
I needed the expertise of the personal tuition.
The assignments were geared to the type of writing you could sell, and it wasn't long before my work was published.
I managed to sell every piece of coursework to magazines and newspapers.
When I received the information, it said if I didn't earn more than the course fees by the end, I would get my money back.
The Writers' Bureau can't promise you our success,
but they do promise to give you the same encouragement and guidance that helped us to become successful writers.
For the Writers' Bureau free information pack, call 0800 55 58 58.
That's free call 0800 55 58 58.
Maybelline asks, what are the smartest lips saying this season?
Pro Vitamin A, Vitamin E,
Major Moisture.
New Moisture Whip Lipstick from Maybelline, New York. The latest to Drool 4 colors, drenched with 40% moisturizers. Now zap with lip perfecting Pro Vitamin A for smooth, supple, saucy lips in all the rage shades.
Now you're talking traffic stopping lips.
New Moisture Whip Lipstick from Maybelline, New York.
Maybe she's born with it.
Guess what? I won't play truth or dare with my color. I use new L'Oreal Elvive UV Filter Shampoo. Truth is, color stays truer longer. Truth is, it's amazing.
Introducing L'Oreal's first shampoo for colored hair. Its color care conditioning formula protects the hair from root to tip.
That's why my color stays truer longer. My hair's soft and shiny with rich, longer-lasting color.
New L'Oreal Elvive UV Filter Shampoo.
And I'm worth it.
Today's Lifetime topic is health. Call us with all your health queries and worries. We'll try and help. Lines are open from 11 till 4.
Join me, Lisa Davis.
Why?
I'll be exploring the wild. I'm just a bit concerned about the issue of poisonous berries here.
Ooh.
The exotic.
We have a plant over here which has got quite an amazing story.
And it's called the black tortoise. Makes us feel very stable and protected.
Oh, that's nice. Anything else to tell?
We've got 5 senses and you can stimulate every one of them in a garden.
Gorgeous Gardens, Sunday at 12:30 on Breeze.
It's a classic soap double.
Right. My green fingers haven't come back from the menders.
Oh, no.
What about this one?
How big is it?
Is that your answer to everything?
Coronation Street
Oh, it's true scenic beauty, is that?
and Emmerdale.
Life in her yet, give her another chance.
And you don't find it a teeny bit overpowering?
It's happening whether you like it or not.
Cheers! Cheers! Cheers!
Granada Plus, home of the hits.
Well, welcome back. As you can see, it's rose pruning time at the moment. And yes, we're having to do this whole bed here. As you can see, I'm using a pair of secateurs, which is probably the old-fashioned way of doing it, if you like, because there's a little bit of controversy at the moment. If you listen to the Royal National Rose Society, they suggest that you can do very rough pruning of your roses. You don't need to go to an outward-facing bud, anything like that. You can even use a hedge trimmer to really just go over your roses, no problem at all. This is a tool that I stole off Judith a little while ago. She was going to do it in one of her new-to-use spots, but I thought I'd use it here. It's quite a nice little machine. It's got good jaws there, which means that you can cut roses up to over an inch in diameter, or any shoots for that matter. And this action here operates the mechanism, and you get some very nice, neat cuts. If I can just go in here, for instance, just pull it back, cut it off. Let's do one at the front. Again, just in, pull and cut. Great thing about it is that the head rotates as well, just like that. So you can cut from any angle and you don't have to go low down, which is great for people with bad back problems, but of course you can go right high up into climbers, etc. That's very handy, I think. But yes, let's look at this rough pruning method. As I say, you can use a hedge trimmer if necessary, or just use a pair of loppers like this. And what they're suggesting is that you just don't bother looking for outward facing buds. You just prune your way through the plant like that. Don't worry about getting it too accurate. And what they're saying, the Royal National Rose Society, what they're saying is that because you're leaving little stubs of leafy growth quite low down on the plant, the leaves on those shoots actually feed the plant and you get much better results. Well, I've seen some results that have been carried out many years ago on rough pruning, and I think that what happens with the plant is that they do get a little bit extra disease in them, and there is that little extra problem. So if you fancy doing it, maybe 3 out of every 4 years, but then on the 4th year, do go down and do proper exact pruning, which is what I'll show you now. Now again, there is this theory that the reason that all this accurate pruning was introduced was because of the head gardeners in the Victorian times. They thought that if anybody could prune roses, then they might be out of a job. But if they had a special way of doing it, they would keep their jobs and therefore they would always be in employment. Well, that's an interesting factor. What you have to do is, as I say, if you are going to do it accurately, is to find a good outward facing bud like we've got here, because you don't want shoots growing into the centre of the rose, otherwise that can encourage disease. And of course, talking of disease, look at that. That's a little bit of mildew that was overwintered on some of the shoots, and of course that would then get on the leaves and cause real problems again this summer. So any shoots like that have to come out because they are diseased. And if you've got any with black spot, the same thing applies. Now how hard you prune your roses will depend on you. I like to hard prune. Okay, it delays flowering by a few weeks, but I think the quality of the blooms is much better. You can just prune, say, by about a third, take a third off. You will get early blooming, but I don't think the quality is there. So let's just carry on doing the rest of this bush. And this is a little dead shoot here. I don't know whether you can see it in the camera, but that's a dead shoot, so that wants to come off completely. And these want to come right down to here. And you just go around your roses, getting rid of that one because that's crossing through the centre. So you want to get rid of that completely. That's quite weak, so we cut that back even harder. And just go around your roses like that, finishing off. And once you've done that, as with any pruning, it is vital to give the plants a good feed. And again, I would always recommend using a rose fertiliser. You'll get much better results. Disease can be a problem, so once you've finished your pruning, give it a good spray with a general fungicide, making sure you get into all the nooks and crannies if you can, and on the soil, because the spores will be on the soil. And then for perfect results this year, the last thing you want to be doing is giving a really good mulch. I'm using bark, but it doesn't matter if you've got manure, anything like that. About 4 inches thick, and you'll get great roses throughout this summer.
Quite a few people must have the conditions we've got here. We love this cedar. In fact, it's part of a pear. One day, not in my lifetime, it'll be too big altogether for the job. In the meantime, it's lovely in the summer and winter alike. But without any doubt, underneath it is dry and shady, and it won't change. It will not get better. Well, about 4 years ago, I planted a little colony of hardy cyclamen there. That is cyclamen coon, native of Turkey. I'm obviously used to a good roasting in the summer. And what it's enjoying here is the drainage on the bank and the fact that it's extremely dry here in the summer. So each year we plant a few more. Now I did start with quite a definite colour scheme. These are my dark colours. There's my favourite pale pinks, and they do have a scent. But what happens with us is the grey squirrels rearrange them. And so I've now got a random collection of them. You can see the plants I'm just putting in because obviously the foliage is lying differently, but you can also see where self-sown ones now are establishing themselves. That is self-sown, and what is interesting about these is that the flower, as it ages, curls over like a spring and pushes the seed head down into the loose ground. So you saw me just titivating the ground up a bit like this, because now when I've mulched it, we'll do nothing whatsoever, and the seed will screw up and poke down into the soil, and a year later it will come. Now, I mentioned the grey squirrels. They too have an idea in our garden as to what we should be doing, because here is a little colony of seedlings. I'll just pull that sign away so that you can see. There's a little colony of seedlings. Now, just look how close together they are. Well, that's where the grey squirrels have buried them. I'll leave those for this year and then just tease them apart later. So, when you start planting, these are 3-year-old plants here, little seedlings like that, pricked out. Now, they don't look very prepossessing when they're in pots, but what's worth noting is that pale flowers tend to have beautifully marked foliage, whereas purple flowers tend to have green foliage. And the winter isn't made that really seriously damages cyclamen coon. They can look a bit unhappy when the ground is frozen and they wilt, but I'm now in my 5th year here. I'm looking for another bulb that associates well with them, and this is a little scilla, or squill scilla, called tuberganiana, and in pots they're more forward than they are on the ground, but they're just poking through. Now that again is very happy drying out well in the summer, and that was 3 or 4 little bulbs put in this pot in October. So they'll go in the front, more of these cyclamen here, but once we've mulched this ground, we'll do absolutely nothing. Well, that's one of the cedars, but over here is its pair, and they'll meet soon. But the cyclamen you see underneath here, this is cyclamen neapolitanum, the autumn flowering cyclamen, which is native of a lot of southern Europe, particularly Italy. It's a bigger leaf, otherwise the same habit, capable of taking even denser shade, and this will be flowering in the autumn, and associated with it will be the Cornish heath, Erica vagans, which again is reasonably happy coming underneath a dry place like this cedar. So plants for easy open places are plentiful, but plants like these cyclamen, in what you'd think was a difficult spot, maybe it hadn't occurred to you to make a really good feature out of what you thought was a problem. These will be flowering in September. There'll be more of them in the rock garden behind, and then also by next autumn we shall have put in here some colchicums for another autumn colour as well.
Well, this week's postbag is a little fuller than usual. Let's get off to a brisk start, Reg, with this one from Roddy Reed in Belfast, and he's having trouble with his Venus flytrap plants. He says he's been very watchful of bright light and the right sort of humidity for them, but one of his 2 plants has weakened quite dramatically. They seem very healthy, he says, although there seems to be a shortage of flies where he is. He's tried to foliar feed with a mister. Could you let him know what seems to be going wrong there?
Well, I think it is some type of nutritional problem that he's got. Here is a Venus flytrap that's sort of magically produced, and as you can see, they are quite interesting plants and appealing, particularly for young people who seem to like to buy them and try and grow them at home. Now, the thing about this plant is it's adapted to growing in really wet conditions and in boggy places where there's very little natural fertiliser in the soil for them, and so they don't really appreciate a lot of liquid feeds or any sort of fertiliser too much. They would much rather catch flies for themselves to feed on, because that's what they're adapted to do. And as you can see, we have the traps on the end of the leaves here, and each one has a reddish centre to it, which helps to make it look a little bit like rotting meat to encourage the flies to come in. And they need somewhere there's a lot of bright light to make them go really good red. And really, they're better off outdoors than they are in the house, because there's not too many flies in people's houses normally, and they don't have much chance to catch any food, which is the important thing. So what I would do with them is, during the summer certainly, I would keep them outdoors in a tray which has got a couple of inches of rainwater in it, so that it mimics their normal conditions more accurately, and there's much more likely to be some flies around for them to catch if they're kept outdoors. And I wouldn't bother trying to give it any sort of liquid feed or any fertiliser at all.
Right.
And then another thing to watch for is the flowering shoots that come out of the centre, which they quite often have. A great tall stem comes out with little white flowers on the end. And it's best if you pinch those off, because when they flower, it does tend to weaken them a lot.
Oh.
So I think what he needs to do is give his trap more chance to catch some food. And don't feed them with bits of cat food or bacon, which some people drop into the traps to close them. If you do that, then there's so much protein in there. You know, the plant's never seen a protein like that before. That it gets from, what it gets from flies. There's nothing like that. And they all rot.
Treat 'em mean, keep it keen.
That's it.
All right, that's the answer to that one. Wilfred Reed's written to us from Edinburgh about a well-behaved asparagus fern that he had until he decided it was getting too big for its pot. He divided it into 2 plants. Within a few months, he said, each plant produced a single shoot about 7 feet long, which climbed up through the Venetian blinds like a triffid. He cut them off at soil level, but each plant repeated the growth. Again, he cut them off, and again, one plant soon grew a similar shoot.
Yeah.
Well, what's going wrong for him there?
Well, really...
So it's much wrong, really.
Well, no, there isn't as far as the plant's concerned. It's what he's been doing to it. This is a type of asparagus fern here. This particular one here is Mayeri. The one that he has is a normal plumosus one. But when he started to go wrong was when he started chopping it up and mucking around with it. Yeah. He chopped it into 2 plants and removed a lot of the foliage. And what it's done then is it's responded to that treatment by the large root area producing this very vigorous single shoot that's torn off up the blinds, because they are naturally scrambling and climbing plants. Yeah. And so you've got a big amount of root pushing food into a small shoot, which has made it grow like mad.
And so it will, won't it? It's just the natural way of things.
That's right. And if he just trims the thing back by half rather than taking it off, it will encourage it to produce more shoots lower down.
Well, if you'd like to know anything more about how to tame your asparagus fern, or anything else we've talked about on this week's programme, you can, of course, get our fact sheet, which this week is number 320, and you can get it by sending, please, a stamped self-addressed envelope to Gardener's Diary, Bridgemere Garden World, near Nantwich, Cheshire, CW57QB. And don't forget the phone lines. They'll be open in just a moment or 2 from now. The number, as always, to ring is 01270 520 455. And there'll be somebody there for about an hour with interesting answers to all those urgent gardening questions. But for now, I'm afraid that's it from Reg and from me and from everybody on the team. We're going to go away and neglect this Venus flytrap plant. We hope you have good gardening weather all next week. Till then, bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Breeze has more gardening lore on offer a week today at the same time. Next, though, getting some tangled personal lives in shipshape order, it's Montel Williams.